We'll go right to the phone callers. First up is Lisa, listening in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I have a question, obviously. My Sunday school class has just started a study, and it's Discovering God's Will for Your Life. And we're talking about the potter and the clay, and it references Romans 9:18 through 23. And it talked about, in the New Living, it refers to the jar, one jar being for decoration and another to throw garbage into. Or in the King James, it talks about the vessel being for honor or another for dishonor. And so I'm just I understand God sees the whole picture, but when you're trying to understand how we can still witness to people, and Christ died for all man's sin, but how does that go along with the fact that God's made them some for, as it said, a decoration, and then some to throw garbage into?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. First is an issue of how you read the Bible. And this is really critical to recognize that the New Testament writers are assuming that you have a working knowledge of the Old Testament. So Paul in Romans, as elsewhere in the New Testament, and remember he wrote 2/3 of the New Testament epistles, he oftentimes quotes from the Old Testament, but he doesn't quote the entirety of the Old Testament passages, but just a portion of those passages, recognizing that you already in your mind have the remainder of the information in view. So with respect to the potter, there are passages in the Old Testament, including Isaiah 29 and Jeremiah 18, from which Paul is drawing. And when you read those passages, you recognize immediately that the potter is not, as it were, saying, I'm the potter, you're the clay, and therefore I can do anything I want. I can make you as a vessel for rubbish, and I can make you a vessel for noble purposes. Why? Because, again, I'm God. No, God can't do everything. God cannot act in a way that is not in accord with his nature. God cannot lie. God cannot create a one-sided triangle. So God can do that which is morally possible and that which is logically possible, but he can't do everything. He can't act in a way that is inconsistent with who he is. Now, taking that view, we can look at the Old Testament passages and recognize that there's a reason that vessels are created for noble purposes, and there is likewise a reason that vessels are created for ignoble purposes. And that reason is that the vessels created for noble purposes respond in obedience. The vessels that are created for ignoble purposes respond in disobedience. So far from this being a passage by which we can say God is capricious, or variously take the next step and say, well, if that's the case, then there's no part that I have to play whatsoever, so why witness? Far from that, we recognize that we have been given a mandate, and that is to spread the good news. The Holy Spirit woos the world by his Spirit, and those who are being wooed can either reject the wooing of the Holy Spirit or receive the wooing of the Holy Spirit, and as such be regenerated and changed such that they come into a loving relationship with God. One other point that I think is significant, and that is you have to, when you read passages like Romans chapter 9 through Romans chapter 11, you want to ask, what question is Paul addressing? Because if you get that wrong to begin with, then all that is foisted onto the text as opposed to extracted from the text may be rooted in your mind incorrectly.